and welcome to another special episode of We're Not Wizards. This one is a Friends of the Show special, and it's going to be called Come Out of the Cold and Dive, Dive, Dive. Now, I know why it's called that, and you will know why it's called that, because joining me to this evening is a gentleman by the name of Andy Benford, who was responsible for a game by the name of Theycomeunseen, which is published by Osprey Games. And we're going to talk about the game, but one of the reasons I wanted to speak to Andy was because Andy, normally we have a discussion about how people get into board games, but Andy's actual story about how his board game connects up to his life is fascinating, which was one of the reasons I wanted to have him on. So, sorry for the massive introduction, Andy, but hello, I hope you're well.
Hello, yes, I'm fine.
Good.
I enjoyed the introduction.
Well, that, I do go on a bit too much and need to shorten them down. Are you well? Are you good?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank
Good
you for
stuff.
inquiring. Yeah.
Good stuff.
And yourself?
Yes, actually, yeah. Yeah, I can't complain, actually. Mustn't grumble.
Mustn't grumble.
Just getting on,
Yes,
just
that's my generation's line, mustn't grumble, but
well,
absolutely fine.
Oh, yeah, I'm a bit, maybe a bit older than I kind of let on, but yeah, I could kind of use that a lot. Now, for people that haven't listened to us before, the reason that we do this is because there are quite simply not enough podcasts out there about board games.
Indeed.
And there's not enough podcasts out there with people with fascinating life stories connected to the games that they actually made. And what we do at We're Not Wizards is we like to find out a little bit about the kind of your history.
Okay.
And then in relation to board games, and then anything that you've been touching on in the present. And obviously we do want to talk about they come on scene. So
Okay.
in relation to board games, if we touch on that, first of all, what kind of games have you played? What have you enjoyed in the past?
Well, I've had quite a lengthy innings. I'm a child of the 50s, born in 1950.
All right.
And back in those days, there wasn't much else to do. Television didn't start till probably 5 in the evening. When we had free time and the weather was good, we were building dens, tree houses, cycling everywhere. But if it rained, yes, you could read a book, but there were also board games. And my first memory of a board game is a game called Fishing by Peeps Games. Came out in 1953. Now, what's great about this podcast, Richard, is when you put the agenda there, it forced me to sort of delve into my past. And the Board Game Geek website is a terrific resource.
It is, yeah.
So I thought, well, I know it was about fishing. Let's have a look. So I typed in fishing, and this drop-down list came with fishing this and fishing that. And there it was, about halfway down, fishing, brackets 1953. Well, I thought, well, that sounds about the right era. And lo and behold, there it was. And the reason that game sort of sticks well in my memory is that I can remember my mother very kindly playing it with me. So this would have been when I was about 6 or 7, I guess. And it's a nice little game. Nothing too dramatic. But if people would go to the Board Game Geek website, type in fishing, find the 1953, and look at the board, it was just a lovely board. It's a plan view of the English countryside with a patchwork of fields, and some of them have walls, some have hedges, some have fences, had little gateways. And the game was simply you rolled dice and you went down to a river.
All right, okay.
And you then threw the dice again to cast to get a fish. And over the course of the game, you tried to get as many pounds worth of fish as you could. And one of the fields was a ploughed field, so if you chose that route, and it was always the shortest route, but you halved your roll. And it was that sort of thing. And it had cards that not very PC really, but it said, "You stop to smoke your pipe." So there I was as a 6-year-old. Okay,
6-year-old boy
I'll smoke
packing
my
the pipe in.
Yeah. So that's my first memory of board games. That was a really nice little game. Sadly, I no longer have it. One I do have, and in fact I brought it here with me so I can have the sort of tactile feel of it as I sort of talk about it. And it's got my name written on it on the front of the box and on the back of the box. I was clearly very protective of it. And that's Contraband.
All right, okay.
By Peeps Games. That's a smuggling game, a bit of bluff and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So those were the sort of early games.
So what was Contraband about then? What did you have to do in that?
Well, that was, I don't know, I can't remember now, about 3, I think you had to have at least 3 players because one player played a customs officer, and let's have a look, customs officer is chosen by agreement or by dealing 1 card to each player.
All right, okay.
And the other 2 players or more then had 4 cards, and they could be just ordinary luggage, but they might be nylon stockings. Here we are. Duty £10. Fine of £30 if you don't declare it. Brandy, duty £5, fine 15. And so what you were doing, you were saying to the customs officer, "Oh, I've just got nothing." And he or she, okay, fair enough, could believe you and say fair enough.
Yeah.
And so you then passed them to the other player, who I think then discarded one and took up another one, and then thought, "Oh, flipping heck." And in amongst these, you could have the crown jewels as one of the things. So you were bluffing and, good fun.
It sounds like there's a game out there called Sheriff of Nottingham, where you basically, you're face up against the sheriff, and you've got a bag of goods, and you've got to try and I think you've got to try and bluff your way through with the items there as well. What, do you know what the fascinating thing for me is that I think a lot of people think, well, board games kind of getting big and complicated and not just about kind of being the monopolies of this world. I think they think that's a relatively new thing, but you're talking about games that are 60 odd years old, which seem to have mechanics which are being replicated kind of nowadays, which is kind of really, really, really kind of interesting.
Well,
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, on that particular one, I mean, another game, and again, I still have a copy of this, Buccaneer. I don't know if you know.
Oh, yeah.
Waddington's brought out. Now, I was looking at that, and that was 1938 when that first came out. And that had, or still has, if people have got it, a really clever mechanic, because there are no dice in it.
Yeah.
And you had cards, and the cards had... I don't know why I'm giving the past tense, it still exists. The cards had pictures of sailors on them and a number, so that if there were 6 sailors on it, you'd have a number 6. And they can be either black or red on these cards. And you had so many cards, and you picked cards up during the game, and if the total of your black sailors was 15 and your red was 5... and they're all together in the hand, then you had a moving power of 20.
All right.
And your fighting power was 15 minus 5, which is 10.
All right.
Now, your opponents could see the back of the cards, and on the back of the cards, they just saw numbers. So they always knew your sailing ability, how far you could move.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what your fighting ability was.
That's amazing.
That's really quite clever.
That is amazing.
A game that came out in 1938. So,
and I'll tell you why, because when we spoke to I think Aaron West at Elsra Games, he was describing a card game which had quite similar mechanics, where you basically it gave an idea of what the power of the card could be on the back. So when you're looking at the opponent, you can see on the back it says, well, this is a 7, which means it could be this, or this is a 4, which means it could be this. But then the actual cards themselves had exactly what the power was going to be. So I mean, this is fascinating stuff. Yeah. As you kind of moved on, did you stay with board games? I mean, have you Now, I guess where you are just now, I mean, do you still play a lot of games at the moment with
not as much as I'd like. It tends to be, family gatherings when there's a number of us around, and I'll persuade them. I'll get a board game out. And back in, we're jumping forward a bit, but I suppose I think it was 2006. I discovered Board Game Geek and registered, and discovered this huge amount of games out there. And so I decided that I would buy for the family, for me really, but for the family, I would buy a board. Commas. Yes, I would buy a board game for Christmas, and so I would select from that list. And I got Pirates Cove. I discovered Days of Wonder, I think, when I discovered Board Game Geek. So I got Pirates Cove one year, Mystery of the Abbey another, Shadows of Camelot, right. And so forth. So have you got quite a collection then, would you say? Not a huge collection. My wife, Sue, would say far too many. I think my wife would say the same. She goes, how many trees do you think you've killed with the collection that you've got? I said, well, if they knew how much enjoyment they were going to give, I'm sure they would have died very, very happy, very, very happy trees. Yeah. Yeah, a reasonable collection. Okay. Now, you're in the unusual position where you don't see many people that say, well, tell you what, I used to go out and I used to fight dragons and I used to defeat orcs and I defended a lot of castles, and then after a while I decided to make a board game about my adventures. So there's not many people that are in that kind of situation. But the board game that you made is very, very, very much tied in to your career. Yes. So, and there's a fascinating kind of breakdown. I mean, I'll read the first line, which is basically said, that you were a retired commander in the Royal Navy. Yeah. You started out in Dartmouth in 1971. And then you embarked on a submarine career. Now, I'm going to leave it at that. So, okay. Do you want to just jump in from there. I mean, tell us a little bit about your career to date, really. Okay. Well, a slight correction on that. I joined Dartmouth in '68. I've known nothing but going from school at the end of A levels straight into the Navy. I had nothing in between. Joined Dartmouth in '68, went through the training, decided I wanted to be a submariner, joined my first submarine proper in 1972. I did do some time on board HMS Finwall, a diesel boat based out in Singapore. Really rugged. Just to get experience of it, but then joined submarines proper in '72. Went through a number of diesel submarines. You move through the jobs. I was the navigator of a couple, sonar officer another one. Then I went to a nuclear submarine. I was the TAS officer, that's torpedo and anti-submarine. Yeah. Then did the Perisher course, which qualifies you to command. Went on to command a submarine that was on exchange in the Australian Navy, and was second in command of a Polaris boat based up in good old Scotland at Faslane. Right. I mean, that's it sort of in a nutshell. Yeah. But coming back to how the game came about. Yeah. It was in, let's see, we got married in 1973, and I was in HMS Grampus. In 1974, the boat was up in Rosyth for a thing called DED, Docking and Essential Defects. What year was that? And when did I say? 74. 74. Yeah, my dad worked in Rosyth Dockyard. Oh, okay. Yeah, so he probably... What, Mr. Simpson? Yeah, he probably was. Yeah, he probably was a... He was a PTO4 or something like that at the time. Okay. But he was always involved in the kind of the refits and refurbs. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, like that, so. Well, the Docking and Essential Defects was a sort of a really mini refit. It was just a sort of, you went into dock and they did Essential Defects. I mean, it said on the tin. Yeah. But I was the navigator, but then I was I came back south to Portsmouth, to HMS Dolphin, to do a specialist navigation course for submarines. And so that was really good. We recently married, and so I was at home in the married quarter in Southsea.
Yeah.
And on the evening news, or the sort of local news programme, there was an item about some chap who was getting a board game published. Now, I can't remember anything about the game, him or anything, but I just remember that event. And when he was asked by the presenter, how do you, or what would you recommend to anybody else who was going to do this? And he said, words to the effect of, find something you know about and make a game around it.
Okay.
And that was it, really. Besides, I've always liked board games. If I sort of go back from 74 back to probably 1960, I made a game back in 1960 which I called Combat, which had balsa wood ships, aircraft carriers, battleships. I mean, the aircraft carrier was about 3 inches long, I think, and 3/4 of an inch wide. And you rolled dice in that one, and you measured out. Well, I got a cork or 2 corks, so it was 2 players with cocktail sticks stuck in them, like a pair of dividers, and you sort of stepped your way across this the playing board of a seascape. So that was back in 1960. Combat didn't get anywhere with that, but it was good fun.
Yeah, okay.
But so when this guy said, do something you know about, I remember thinking, well, I can do that. I like games. I've already had this Combat when I was 10 or so.
Yeah.
And what I know about is submarines. So that's how it came to be. And very quickly, I put together a little prototype, which I've still got. It is played on 2 boards, and so I've got 2 little A4 boards. And from the outset, I decided that I didn't want any dice in it. I know this may go against many board gamers,
No, I mean, Colin, and even myself, we don't like dice because dice means chance, and
absolutely,
and that means that you can technically play a game, be extremely lucky, and win a game without doing anything more than rolling a couple of dice. So you're in
I'm among friends. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, my feeling came about because I'm sad memories of risk, and being you can see yourself. You're being reduced down to the Kamchatka Peninsula.
Yeah,
you've got your armies there, and everybody else. They're coming to you from Alaska and everywhere else, and just being bombarded with dice rolls. And I was playing that as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, and back then, I mean, I'm always being competitive, but back then, losing it's sort of hurt. As you grow older and you go through life. I mean, now I don't mind if I win or lose. I just enjoy the process of playing a game.
Yeah. And
so you make that change. But so I can remember feeling quite sore about being set upon by my friends on the Kamchatka Peninsula. And also Cluedo. That's a good family game.
Yeah.
But what is so annoying about Cluedo is, as you know, you once you've decided who did it, where and with what, you've then got to go to where...
Yeah.
To make the announcement. And so you thought, right, I've cracked it. Right, I need to get to the library. Where is it? Oh, it's 6. Right, roll 1. Everybody else goes, next go, roll 1. Oh. So it was that sort of experience that made me think, no, I don't want dice.
We have an ongoing joke at the club, which is it's almost like a kind of a movement to almost flip the table kind of thing, where we say, where you just go right, and you kind of make the movement with your hands when the entire table's covered with components and pieces, and somebody takes the time, like it's like time of death or something, and they just go right, flip the table 8-17, kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of games out there that are considered kind of mainstays and kind of classics, and a lot of them are down to, somebody said to me, I'm Cluedo champion of the world. I was like, all right, good at rolling dice then, are you? Kind of thing. But if somebody said to me they're Noughts and Crosses champion, they might get a little bit more respect. So, when okay, so 70s you put together kind of like the prototype for They Come Unseen, and obviously we're going to talk more about the mechanics to help people kind of understand what we do. But where did you go from there? I mean, what happened next?
Okay, well, firstly, back then, because I've got a vast imagination, I called it Submarine. And
you might as well.
So, well, it explained what it was about. And anyway, so I developed it. I wrote out the rules in manuscript, and then I got Sue. Well, she very kindly said, "Well, I can type those." She's a touch typist, so, and I've still got those in the box, those original pages. And I did some little diagrams to demonstrate how it all went. And I played it with a few people. I mean, in diesel boats, you don't have a lot of time for board games because there isn't much space. So in the diesel submarines, when we had relaxation, we'd either play liar dice, which I'm rubbish at, a game called Scats, which is just played with ordinary pack of cards, and different cards do different things, and you got, you put down a 7 and it changed the suit, and you declared what the suit is, and other cards reverse direction, and if somebody went to play and it had reversed, and you'd be penalised a card for twitching, and it was a silly game but really good fun. But because of the way of life and the small space, board games weren't so good there. So it's really, I played it when ashore, but with some colleagues. It was only when I went into the nuclear boats, where you got more space, that it sort of took off.
Difference? I mean, are you? I mean, are you happiest if you say, right, I'm off to my cupboard, kind of thing, and you're just like, there we go, this is nice. I can put my arms out and I can touch either side of where I am, kind of thing. I mean, I'm
content with that. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of, when somebody says, "Oh, I like Sunday morning, I like to really wrap myself up with a duvet," kind of, it's like, yep, that's as we kind of sort it out. But you said, the nuclear subs, you've got. Was it kind of like chalk and cheese in terms of the size of them then, or?
Yes, I mean the diameter of the hull of a nuclear boat. Well, they vary depending on the size of the boat, but you're talking about sort of 30 feet plus. Right. Whereas the diameter of a conventional boat is 17 feet, I think. So half the size, and that's 17 really feet. Small, you also have to cram in machinery into that, and
pipes and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So the game didn't get much play in the diesel boat time, but certainly in the nuclear boat time. And it was in HMS Sovereign that it got a really good outing. And in fact, it went down particularly well. And the engineers mounted my rather flimsy paper board onto an aluminium backing, put a Perspex top on it, and connected the two together with the board trap between, with lovely brass nuts and bolts that they manufactured back aft. Clever chaps.
Have you still got that?
No, I left it on board. I don't know where it is. I left it on board HMS Sovereign when I left the boat, and for them to use. I mean, the boat has since paid off. It's finished its life. Actually, it's probably sitting in Devonport waiting to be
taken apart.
Because of the reactor core and all that sort of stuff. So yes, I don't know if somebody thought, I'll take that away. So having left Sovereign, I then had to manufacture another one. Yeah. Which was fine.
Did you not call in an old favour and say, "Listen, we'll get the"? Did you? Because I take it you had hand drawn out the artwork for the original board, then, yeah.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
But I just did that again.
Just no bother.
Well, just and then so the game. I mean, it sort of developed from the original, and the boards got bigger, and I put in a few things, different bits. And to start with, I mean, it's sort of chicken and egg here, because people who don't know the game won't know exactly what I'm talking about. But the surface ship side have fuel and weapon resources. Now, in the original game, you just place them at the start of the game on different islands, and that was it.
Yeah.
And they could go around and collect them as the game progressed. But at a later stage, I thought, well, that's not really realistic, because at sea you have replenishment ships, supply ships, container ships, and you get the fuel on the fly at sea. So I brought that into the game. But then I suppose it just sort of bimbled along in that format. And
did you ever get any colleagues coming up to you and saying, "Oh, you should be doing this. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that?"
Well, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some of that, but I'm pleased to say there wasn't much.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, if there was, I've conveniently forgotten it.
If there was, you say, well, yeah, that's very clever of you. Just you're confined to your quarters for the next 4 days for being a smart aleck, basically. And you're like that. Damn, I should have put that in. So,
well, not when it was my captain talking to me, no. But
exactly. Go your room.
Go away, sir.
Go to your room. No, you go to your room. You go to your room. Kind of thing.
So, I'm gonna lose my thread in a minute. So it developed a bit, but then it was sort of static, and there were times, I have to say, when I was in shore jobs, I've either been under the water or under concrete, and that's my sort of life, because my shore jobs tended to be in bunkers underground, doing the operational side of submarining. And if in the control centres. So yes, underwater or under concrete. And there were times when the game just sat in the back of a cupboard and just came out occasionally. But how it then got from that prototype... I suppose I should also say that there was one chap in Sovereign who was really keen on it, and he said, "Oh, can I have a copy?" And I made him a copy. So there is another copy out there somewhere.
There's another copy out there somewhere.
But that isn't quite... They're not quite the same as the finished item. Anyway, so there we with that. And then I retired from the Navy in 1993 and actually went then into the National Health Service managing doctors. And that's interesting, going from I was in a exclusively male environment, because in my service time, the Wrens were shore-based only, so it was only men at sea. Yeah. So I went from almost an exclusively male environment to quite nearly an exclusively female environment in the NHS. So I've seen both sides of life in that respect.
It's a bit of a culture shock going from one side, I guess, to the other. Or did you...
Yes. Well, in one you had the Naval Discipline Act,
yeah, I suppose,
which basically said, you do what I'm telling you, and in the other one you didn't.
It's like, no, I'll decide when I'm doing what you're telling me.
Yes.
We'll agree you'll say words, and I'll agree that I might occasionally decide I'm going to do them or not, kind of thing. I mean,
there was that slight difference. But then... And so I did that for nearly as long as I was in the Navy. And it was when I retired I took early retirement.
Yeah.
Because I could, so why not?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Live in a lovely little village, Little Coxwell in Oxfordshire, about 100 adults, I think, a pub. What more do you need? And I was out one day walking our collie, Floss, round the fields, and I bumped into a chap in the village, Rob Brown, walking his dog, and we just got chatting about this and that. And Rob's had a quite a varied career, but I can't remember how it came up in conversation, but he said that he had a little invention that was to do with medicine. I mean, he's one of these guys who something happens to him, and rather than thinking just, oh, that's interesting, and walking away, he thinks, oh, that's interesting. I'm sure he could do that better. And he went to see a practice nurse, I think, who did something, and to test, I think it was a cut or something, to test something, she went to her drawer and got out a paper clip, unbent it, and then used this paper clip to do whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he said, "Really?" And no, if that had been me, I'd have come home and said to Sue, "Do you know what they did in the surgery? They used a paper clip," and that would have been an end to it. But old Rob went away and thought, there must be a better way. So anyway, that's what he'd done, and he managed to get this thing, bought up and was being manufactured.
All right.
Anyway, we left this conversation. He went his way and I went mine. And I was walking along a bit, and I was thinking, that's really good. I'd really like to have something that I could invent and get it, produced.
Yeah.
And a little while after that, it suddenly sunk in. I said, "Well, you idiot!" I thought to myself, "You've got this game there." So that was it, really. So that was sort of autumn 2013.
That long ago. So it was conceived in the 70s, and it was coming to fruition in 2013.
Well, 2013, I then thought, so if we backtrack, I mean, I've always wondered if it had any commercial promise, if people other than Submarines would enjoy the game. But if you go back to the 70s when I did it, I mean, there was no internet. How do you find publishers? You can't email them the attachment, the rule set. You'd have to post them off into the bundu, and you might never get it back because it gets lost in the. So it just wasn't something that was practical. And plus, I was quite a busy chap, and I was away at sea a lot. So,
exactly. It's like,
it didn't.
Could you send me tomorrow? Can you wait maybe two? I mean, were you away when you were doing your kind of tours or duties or your times away? How long were you away for? Were you away for like quite long stretches of time on the submarine?
Not as long as they do now. But then again, the Navy is really quite stretched.
Yeah.
But that's another story. I suppose about 3 months was a sort of normal sort of thing.
Right.
The longest. Let's see. I think the longest I was dived was 13 weeks. And 8 of those we were below periscope depth. So, but that was a nuclear boat, clearly, So,
yeah.
But that sort of length of time. Yes, I'd always wondered if it had any chance of being picked up by anybody.
Yeah.
And so there we were. I'd suddenly thought, "You've got this game. Have a look at it." And so I got it out and thought, okay. My gaming experience had moved on because I'd discovered Days of Wonder, those games which I like.
Yeah.
Red November, Forbidden Desert.
Oh, yeah.
Those sort of things. And although Forbidden Desert I hadn't actually discovered at this point in time. I'm confusing myself, let alone the listeners.
No,
yeah.
It's fine.
I then, having decided this is what I'd like to try and do, and I had the time to do it because I was retired, I then set about trying to find out about games fairs. I'd heard about Essen, and I found Essen on the internet, and I sent them an email, and they said, "Oh yes, you can come along. We have an authors section or something, and it's so many euros to do it." And I was thinking about that and the logistics of getting over there, and that was quite a while away. And then I did another search, and I discovered the UK Games Exposition. I just didn't know it happened.
Yeah.
And so this was about December 2013, I guess, when I was having that thought. And I got in contact with Richard Denning, the chap who runs it. He was extremely helpful, very helpful. And he said, yeah, you can come along. We have a playtest zone. And that's run by a chap called Rob Harris, and they have the UK playtest or whatever.
Yeah.
And he said, and the only sort of gem he gave me, he said, just make sure that you playtest your game as much as you can.
Yes.
So that you bring along as good a product as you can. So I thought, right, here we go. It's now December 2013. UK Games Expo, it's the end of May next year, 2014. I've got to get at this. And I thought, well, I need to actually buff up the rule book. Mm-hmm. I need to see if there's any bits and pieces I can do. And this is actually when, I think around this time, I discovered Forbidden Desert, and we'd been playing that, which involves, as you'll know, and I guess a lot of your listeners will know, has a storm mechanic in it.
Yes.
The sandstorm goes round. And we'd played that a few times, really enjoyed it. Haven't actually... Oh, no, we did beat the game once, but most times we don't. But anyway, as I said, I don't mind that. I just enjoy the process of the game.
Yeah.
And it was at that point I sort of came on, I thought, that's really good. And I thought, well, good heaven's sake, if any game needs weather in it, it's mine. The sea and the sea states and thermoclines and that sort of stuff. So that was the main thing that I added to the game between December 2013 and going to the Games Expo, was deciding on how I was going to work the weather mechanic. And I put out an email to the village, and I said, right, all you closet board gamers, come out of the closet. I want people to come along and help me get this ready for the UK Games Expo. And I got about 4 volunteers. And so they'd come around to our house. I'd sit them around the table, put the game in front of them, tell them what to do. They would play the game. I'd feed them wine and beer, drink and nibbles. And then
keep them there for a couple of days until they...
And, they then fed back a few things.
Yeah.
And I'd then take that away and refine it, and then they'd come back. And so we went through that process until we came up to the Games Expo. Now, I booked myself a slot on the Sunday in the playtest zone.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the only slot that was available, really. And I went up on the Saturday. I'd never been to the Games Expo before. Fascinating experience. But I went up on the Saturday and stayed overnight. And I thought, well, if I'm going to expect people to playtest my game on the Sunday, I really ought to put in the hours on the Saturday. So Muggins went along to the playtest zone on the Saturday, and I played a number of games. And at the end of the game, I'd fill in my form and say, yeah, okay, well, I've got a game that I'm bringing along tomorrow. Are you going to be here? No. So nobody that I spoke to who'd taken a game along clearly had the same ethos that I did, ethic, to think, if I'm going to play somebody, if I want them to play mine, I'll play theirs. Anyway,
yeah.
So there we are. There's a lesson in life. But I felt good about myself. And I turned up on the Sunday, laid the game out, and I was ready and waiting for the punters to arrive. And interestingly enough, there was a chap at the next table to me, and he was doing something, and there was a bit of I don't think our slot had fully opened. Oh. And I went over and chatted to him, and it was Matt Leacock.
What?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Just
because
I
didn't recognise him. Because, I wasn't expecting to see him, and I don't think I would be familiar enough with him to recognise him. Anyway, and we were chatting about something, and maybe I said something like, oh, well, Forbidden Desert, that gave me the idea of putting weather in mine. And he sort of handed me a card, and it was Matt Leacock,
And you're like that? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was quite good. Anyway, the game was then play-tested and went down well. And I packed it up. And as I was packing it up, one of the guys in the playtest zone came along and gave me Duncan Malloy's business card from Osprey Games.
Oh, yeah.
And Duncan had been there on the Saturday. I don't know if he was still at the expo on the Sunday. But anyway, he'd been at the playtest zone on the Saturday and left the cards. And as I understand it, he sort of left it with them and said, look, if there's any good strategy games, please hand the people my card. So I was given the card, which was jolly good. Zoomed home, sent him an email. And he said, can you send over the rule set, which I did. And initially he sort of said, thank you very much for sending your 46-page rule set, but we might pass on that. And I sent him an email back saying, well, thank you very much. I understand. I think also I sort of said, actually, I think the game is a little simpler than the rule set may indicate, but there we are. Do you know of any other people? I would appreciate, any other contacts you might be able to give me.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a gap. And in that hiatus, I thought, I need to do something about this 46-page rule book. So I reduced it to 26 or 28, something like that.
That's a big cut. That is a big cut, though.
Yeah, I put lots of diagrams in.
Oh, right, okay.
Pictures, speak volumes. So
yeah, they do,
yeah. And I hadn't heard back from Duncan. It was a couple of weeks, and I suppose I was a bit naughty in a way. Well, no, not naughty, but I just thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll send him the new rule set and just say, I know that you're not keen, but this is the rule set I wished I'd had when you first asked. And actually, I think before he read it, I think Duncan had been sort of thinking about my game in the interim, and he came back and said, "No, actually, I've been thinking about it. Can you bring it in?" And so I took it in July of 2014. He liked it. I left it with them, and then in October I was told, "Yeah, it's going to go to print." And so that was October 14, and it came out in October 15.
How did it make you feel? After something that has had the lifestyle, had the lifespan of an average human being, for somebody to pick up and say, I know you've had obviously kind of your peers kind of playing it and saying, yeah, this was work, and then you've had your playtesters playing it and playing it work. When you got the kind of the communication from Duncan, who, if you're out there, Duncan, hello, because you are a lovely, lovely guy, and
yes, I'd agree
he's
with that.
Fantastic guy, and he's one of my favourite episodes. Was chatting to him, but how did that make you feel then?
Well, it was actually slightly surreal.
Yeah.
To start with, I sort of looked at this email, and he said something like, "Congratulations, I'm pleased to let you know that it's gone through all our editing procedures and will be published, and congratulations." And I thought, and I sort of sowed it so. I said, "Look, they're going to publish my game."
What did she say? What did she say to that?
I don't recall. Well, she was pleased for me. I don't think
doubt.
she,
Yeah.
But yes, that was just extraordinary. And so I then sort of, after that, I sort of reflected on how we'd got there.
Yeah.
And it did occur to me that I'd been extraordinarily lucky, because there are a number of things that it's like the sliding doors. Is that the film?
Yes.
Sliding doors.
Gwyneth Paltrow and John Hamm.
Yeah. It just one of these things. So if I hadn't taken early retirement, I wouldn't necessarily have been in the position to find the time to do what I did. Okay, so that's one.
Yeah.
If I hadn't bumped into Rob Brown and had this discussion come about his invention, then that again, there's an opportunity to miss where we are. I think I was really fortunate that I was at the Games Expo the year that Osprey, who, let's face it, are into military themed things, were starting board games, because They Come Unseen and The King is Dead are their first two board games ever.
Yeah.
So, if I delayed retiring for a year, I'd have missed Osprey at the outset. That's not to say it wouldn't have been picked up, but had I not spoken to Rob, and
I just
thought,
it bakes
gosh,
your noodle. I think that's what.
Yes, it just sort of all fell into place, and to get the game picked up at the very first attempt.
Yeah.
No, I didn't go to any other publishers. I just went to the playtest zone, and there we go. It's just nuts, really. But it's just been a thoroughly enjoyable experience. I just love it. I love interacting with the people on the Board Game Geek site, answering their queries and so forth. Yeah, it's just terrific.
So let's talk about the game itself, because we've talked about the genesis of They Come Unseen. So if I am looking over Osprey Games website, and I'm thinking about it, how would you? What's the mechanics behind it? What do you do in it? How would you play it? Just to give people a general idea of why they should consider picking it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I should say it's not a simulation. It's a game about submarines and about anti-submarine warfare, and it uses authentic terminology. It therefore has actions which are based on reality, but it's not a simulation. You can't simulate anti-submarine warfare on a bit of cardboard, so many inches by whatever. But it's as authentic as you can get it, I think, because a submariner or anybody in the Navy coming to this and looking at that say, oh yeah, okay, I recognise that, I understand that. Yeah, that makes all sense. So it is thematic. For people who don't know about it, there are two sides, NATO and the Soviets.
Because this is set in the Cold War, isn't it?
Yes. Now, yes, around the sort of 60s. The technology is for about the 60s, 70s. Basically, when I joined submarines, as I've said, in 72.
Yeah.
So the diesel-electric submarines, yes, nuclear boats were around the time, but it's diesel-electric boats. You need that because if it was nuclear-powered submarines, in a game, how would you sort out how they get found? As I'll explain in this description, the diesel boats make it sort of flow. Anyway, so you have two sides. NATO, they're operating 2 submarines. The Soviets, they're operating 2 destroyers and a logistic fleet of 3 ships, a supply ship and 2 container ships. The NATO are a bit concerned about the Soviets developing nuclear power and so forth, and submarines and so forth up in the Barents Sea, and they want their submarines to go up there clandestinely and take out installations. So on the board there are 6 islands with Soviet ice stations using the phonetic alphabet Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot. And they're going to do that by landing special ops forces to destroy the facilities. The Soviets on their side don't want this to happen, clearly.
Exactly.
So that's their task. They know their intelligence.
Leave them alone, please.
Yes. Their intelligence is good. They know a couple of submarines are around.
Yeah.
And they send out their destroyers to hunt them down and to sink them.
Yeah.
And they need to keep themselves organised by having their fuel and weapons delivered to them by their logistic fleet. So it's a logistic game within the game.
Yeah, okay.
Now, as I said right at the beginning of this, there are no dice in the game, and the submarines have a control panel, and they have a battery gauge and a depth gauge, and the destroyers have a fuel gauge and a weapon gauge. And so the amount that a submarine or a destroyer moves is completely up to the player. There's no chance in that. They decide. But it has a cost for battery for the submarine and fuel for the destroyer. And for the submarines, as their battery reduces, they can come up and do a snort move. That's when you come up to periscope depth. There are 2 boards.
Yeah.
One board is the deep Barents, and it has areas of depth, but 250 feet, 450 feet, and 650 feet.
Yeah.
And the submarines can go to 200, 400, or 600, depending on the depth of water. And the main board, which is seen by everybody, the deep one is hidden by a screen, is the surface of the Barents Sea.
All right, okay.
And so the submarines, when their battery is getting low, appear briefly on the main board. They leave a radar datum. Basically, as far as the game is concerned, the Soviets have detected their masts on radar, so they know, oh, right, there was a submarine there very briefly. So that gives them a bit of a datum, and they can focus in on that. They have a sonar templates, which they can place down with coloured areas, and the submarine players have to declare if they're in one of those particular areas. And if they're not, they just say no contact.
Yeah, this reminds me of the hidden movement game, well, one of my favourites, which is Letters from Whitechapel, where the police will go up to a certain area in London, and they're surrounded by kind of cubes, and they will then say detect on a square, and if Jack the Ripper's been in that square, he has to say, yep, I've been there, kind of thing. So this sounds sounds really interesting. So yeah,
well, yeah. So the sonar templates, if the detection is forward of the beam, so from the beam to the bow, it's a little more accurate from abaft the beam, from the beam to the stern.
Yeah,
that's just to give a little variety, because sonar isn't 100%. You can't go out to sea, switch on the sonar, and you just detect everything that's there.
It's not like in the
problems.
movies then.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was to sort of cater for that, and there's a blind arc that the submarines can utilise if they pass directly underneath the ship and things like that. So having sorry, I was saying therefore about that's how the submarines increase their battery percentage by appearing occasionally on the main board. That's why I say with nuclear submarines they've got no need to refuel, to anything. It's just gone forever. The game just wouldn't work in that respect. So the Soviets then moving around, they move, and as they move, they use fuel. And their way of replenishing the fuel is to either go into one of the ice stations that hasn't been destroyed, excuse me, where there is fuel available, and take on that fuel, or they can meet up with a supply ship as long as it's got fuel on board, and do that at sea, which is the replenishment at sea, which is a factual thing that does take place. So that's why there's no luck in the movement. It really is up to the teams how they go. Yeah. And I do call it a team game. It's for 2 to 5 players. If 2 people are playing, then one person plays NATO and operates both submarines. Yes. I mean, they can operate one submarine if they like, but why not operate 2? And the Soviet player operates the 2 destroyers and the logistic fleet. The logistic fleet don't have a control panel for fuel or anything. They're just given. It's assumed they have enough fuel for the game. That's fine. So they have a maximum move that they can do, and they move around taking the fuel about. If you have fuel and weapons, if you have 3 players, again, you could have one doing both submarines and the other 2 taking a destroyer each plus the fleet.
Yes.
2 players each side. It's a team game. And I mean, some people I've noticed. There's one person on Board Game Geek saying, "Oh no, I don't like games where there's player elimination." Well, I can understand that can be a bit tricky in some respects, but then again, a sort of war game, there is going to be elimination. However, but having said that, you see that the way it has always been played, I've always played it in my experience at sea, is that the 2 NATO people behind their screen, they're sort of planning together because they know the targets they need to go. They go to 4 of the 6 islands, and that's decided by card draw.
Yeah.
And they're very much doing it together, thinking, oh, okay, how are we going to do this and other? So actually, if your submarine gets taken out of the game, okay, that submarine's out of the game, but that doesn't stop that person still being involved with the team. Yeah. So I've never really seen it as a player having a player elimination problem. Yeah.
And if it gets really bad, you just say, "Oh, look, here's another submarine's just turned up." If somebody just throws somebody throws their toys out the pram,
True enough, you could do that, yeah.
It's just, although you've got reinforcements, kind of.
Yeah, but having said that, I mean, the win condition, no, it would never end. The win condition for the Soviets is to sink both submarines. And the submarines the submarines have to take 3 hits to be sunk.
So, in terms of one of the things you mentioned earlier on about, you said Forbidden Desert, and you said the weather. Yeah. So how does that affect the game then? What difference does that make to things?
Well, it just makes it harder, but also I think it sort of it perfects the balance. It's pretty balanced, I think, and certainly the people who've played it and who've reported back seem to concur with this, that it is balanced. But the weather, the board is divided up into 3 sea areas: west, central, and east. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the game, one of the cards is drawn, the station cards, and it's got a number on it. And that number sets a token on a track that runs from 1 to 6. There are 3 little tracks, one for each sea area, running from 1 to 6. And say you draw the card 3, then the token for the western area goes on 3, the central area goes on 2, and the eastern area goes on 1.
Right, okay.
And then that sets the weather for the beginning of the game, but it doesn't actually come into force for the first turn. Then at the end of the first turn, the weather's in force, and then at the end of every successive turn, these tokens just move 1 to the right.
Right,
so basically, the weather is spreading across the board, and the 1, 2, and 3, just up to 6, are for different storm levels. Storm level 1, 2, and 3, it's calm. The weather has no effect. Storm level 4, the waves are high, so the ships are reduced. Their maximum move is reduced by 4 squares.
Oh, right,
so
okay.
Storm level 4 reduced by 4. Storm level 5 reduced by 5. But also certain things can't take place. And in Storm level 5, there's a thermal layer is created at 300 feet. So it means that a submarine below that, at either 400 or 600, won't be detected by sonar, even if it's there.
All right, okay.
And then for Storm level 6, ships are reduced by maximum move reduced by 6.
Yeah.
Submarines aren't able to snort. There's a layer now at 500 feet, so only submarines at 600 feet are undetectable.
Yeah.
And it just puts that extra layer and a realistic layer of complexity on it. And then so if you're a submarine captain, you think, right, okay, I know I'm not going to be able to snort when it gets to Storm level 6. I need to get my snort in now. And actually, if I'm in deep enough water, once I go deep and the next turn the weather goes to 6, as long as I'm below...
Yeah.
Well, they won't be able to detect me, but they might think, well, we know he was roughly there. Actually, he couldn't probably be any further away. So, yes, but it just adds that extra complication and it's more thematic. Or further. Yeah, the theme is enhanced. That's probably the way to put it.
Have you, now the game's been published,
yeah.
Do you go back to it and have you thought about kind of slight changes you would make or change the components or anything like that? Or are you just kind of like, that'll do. This is fine. I'm quite happy.
Well, I'm really happy with the game as Osprey have produced it.
Yes.
I have done some work on an expansion.
Oh, okay.
But whether that'll ever come to anything, but the expansion gives a different mission for NATO. It's extracting agents rather than blowing places up. And it brings in a few more ships and also a hidden element on the Soviet side. So that's just going to give a different option for players. I'm very happy with it. I don't know, as I say, whether it'll come to anything.
Yeah.
Have
you ever, with other designers, because you've got something out there and published, have you ever thought about any other kind of games at all? Have you still got a couple of ideas? I've thought, I could maybe do this. Or...
I've actually got one that I'm toying with. Yes, you're quite right. Having done this, I sort of thought, good heavens, you've designed a game.
Exactly.
Should I be doing something else? It's a case of the need. You can't. I don't think you can go looking for the idea. It just has to hit you in the face.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
so for quite a while, nothing came to me, and I don't think I've actually got the sort of mind that will come up with an abstract game. So I think what I've come to realise, that my games have to have some historical background, some real story. And so I'm working on a game which is going to be a sort of worker placement, I think is the board gaming term for it, which I'm sort of learning as I go along. It's about the archipelago of St Kilda.
Oh, okay.
And my sort of working title is either St Kilda, A World Apart, or St Kilda, The Edge of Existence. That's where I am at the moment. And it's because I've seen St Kilda through a periscope. I would love to go to St Kilda, but I haven't managed that. But I've seen it through a periscope, and I've read a couple of times a great book. It's probably the only book about St Kilda. It's called. I've got it here with me, so I didn't forget the title. St Kilda: The Life and Death of. And for people who don't know, but they probably do, St Kilda is, I can't remember the distance, about 40, 50 miles to the west of the Outer Hebrides. And these people scratched out a living there for centuries. But in 1930, they were evacuated because they were becoming too much of a strain on the mainland, trying to support them in the end. And I just love the story. I know it's a sad one in a way, but they had this existence there. And when you look at the map of the archipelago of St Kilda, it would just make a fantastic playing board, just really interesting. And their lives revolved around harvesting seabirds off the cliffs, making Harris Tweed from the sheep that they had on the Stack Islands around in the archipelago. They produced oil from boiling down the birds. So there's all these different things they have to try and achieve, and actually they did at times really struggle because they're on the edge of existence. They had to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just thought, the map of the archipelago looks great, and the story's good. And so what I'm trying to do is to come up with I think it'd be a solo play or 2 players.
Yeah.
Just trying to manage, and the game would last over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And basically you've got to survive. Anyway, so that's what I'm sort of playing at, and I'm doing a little better, I think, coming up with an imaginative name at the outset, unlike Submarine. And incidentally, on that, when it came the Submarine becoming They Come Unseen.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Well, it was when I was back in December 2013, when I was starting this process to see if I could get it published. I just sort of looked at it and I thought, no, you can't go along with a game called Submarine.
Well, okay, here's the thing, because we've had a guest on, I think Mark from the London Board Game Company, and his board game was about football, and it was called The Football Game. So,
Well, okay.
he was fascinated. He could actually register that as a trademark in a game, but nobody had ever called it just The Football Game. So, maybe Submarine. You never know.
Well, indeed. But anyway, so I thought, no, it needs to have something a little more. And I can't remember the time, but maybe it's about a week I was sort of thinking this and the other. And then, again, it's sort of the penny dropped. The motto for the Royal Navy Submarine Service is "We Come Unseen."
Ah, right, okay.
Now, I didn't think it was right. I just felt uneasy about taking my service's motto and just putting it on a board game.
Yeah.
No, but I thought, no, tell you what, I can change that to they, put it in third person, and that makes sense. And so that's how the name came about.
That's fantastic. I mean, this is all, fascinating stuff. As I say, it's very rare. It's rare, yeah. I've never spoken to anybody that's kind of the theme of the game has basically been their kind of their career, and they've kind of lived it in themselves as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if people are listening and they're like, well, I would like to get a copy of this game, it's available through Osprey Games. So we'll put a link. We'll put a link on the actual show notes.
Okay.
It is currently now. I'm not. It's usually about £40, isn't it? It's currently it's on sale at the moment, I believe.
It was on sale, but that was the January sale.
Right.
Whether it's still on sale, I don't know.
Okay.
But it was half price, yeah.
Yeah, it was £40, and I mean, just going down this, you get the board, you get the deep board, you get the game screen. You get the control panels, you get the search pieces, you get the ice station cards, you get ships, the submarine tokens, the actual history and tactics book as well. So were you involved in kind of writing? Did you pen all that together yourself?
The history. It was really nice. Duncan said, "Oh, I think what we need to do with this, we'll have a rule book, and it'd be good to have a history bit, because in my 46-page initial tome, it was that long because of quite a lot of it was explaining at the time, here's the rule, this is how the game plays, and by the way, this is the reality of it.
All right. Okay.
So basically what I did is I just ripped that out of the rule book and made it into a separate book, and Duncan said, let's put in this book. So that has the introduction and really just puts a tiny little description of why it is as it is. And I've done a couple of pages on life at sea in a diesel submarine with some great photographs, and then submarines in the Cold War, how they were operated, and anti-submarine warships in the Cold War. Yeah, and at the back of it, some tactical suggestions for the game based on that historical reality.
That's just. So have you ever thought about doing like a director's cut and putting the 46-page one out again? And just there you go, have it all, have the lot kind of thing.
It did just cover just about everything, so I suppose it had some advantages, but it had an index. I mean, because it was so big, it had an index.
Cool.
Yeah.
But you can pick it up from Osprey Games. I'm guessing that you can get it from there, and all good
retailers.
All good. I know I sound like one of those salespeople on the telly. All good retailers. Our operators are standing by waiting to take your call. If people want to, obviously people can go to the Osprey Games site if they want to keep an eye on what else is happening with Osprey Games.
Yeah.
Do you have a presence on the social medias, on the interwebs of this world?
I do. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter I'm very happy with my handles, if that's the term to get to out there. I'm on Twitter as @Perisher80, 80.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Because that was the year I did Perisher, so Perisher80. And on that, I started tweeting about the game as well as submarines and my interests.
Yeah.
But then I thought, actually, the time has come where I need to have a They Come Unseen Twitter account, which I have, and that's, you guessed it, @theycomeunseen. And I really put that one there so that I could put in additional thoughts. It's called sort of tips, talks and tactics about the board game They Come Unseen. So I put up thoughts there for people to help them enjoy the game, and what I'm hoping is that people will start coming back to me in direct message or tweet their thoughts and ideas, questions, comments, and so forth. So yes, at Perisher80 and at They Come Unseen, and I also have a They Come Unseen Facebook page.
Oh right, okay. Well, I'll tell you.
So you just search on Facebook for They Come Unseen.
Well, we'll make sure that we put the links in the show notes so that if anybody is interested, everybody is interested tonight, they can jump on and they can keep an eye on things.
Okay, and I can add to that. Sorry, Richard, I can add to that. It's all They Come Unseen. theycomeunseen @gmail.com.
If they want to email you directly.
Yeah, I'm happy for that. Yeah.
Cool, brilliant. Okay. Andy, this has been fascinating. It's as I say, we kind of spoke a good couple of months ago about having a chat, and then I'm so glad that we've done it because this has been brilliant chat. I loved every minute of it.
Good. Well, I've enjoyed it too. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been very good.
It's my pleasure. I guess there's only two things to do. The first thing is, as always, is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Andy?
We're not wizards.
Definitely not.
We may be many things, but we're not.
Absolutely. And the last thing is to thank everybody for dropping by, tuning in, and listening in to my delightful chat this evening with Andy. As I say, I will put all the notes in the show notes, so we have some notes to show, and it only remains for us to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Andy.
Down all masts, 6 down, keep 400 feet. Bye.
I can't. I just need to say goodbye. I can't top that. I'll sound like a fool. So stay safe, stay hidden, and until next time, bye-bye.